My name is Stephen Harvey. I know Andy through having been at Huddersfield doing a PhD, and I'm here to ask her some questions about this recent piece, Alucita,
Yeah.
the second version of Alucita. So we're going to start off, I think, with some. I'm guessing you know so many people here, but just for the record, can you give us some idea of who Andie Brown is and a bit of her history?
Wow. On Friday the 13th.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
International Kindness Day.
Pardon?
On International Kindness Day.
Oh, International Kindness Day. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm a musician stroke artist. I've been making music since I was about 13, which is a very long time ago. And I started off playing in bands when I was about 16, and I did that for quite a long time as a bass player. Actually, behind me there's a bass guitar and a double bass, which unfortunately don't get played very much anymore. And then I think in 2007 I'd just left a band that I was in, and I was just thinking that I wanted to carry on making music, but I didn't really want to do that in a band. Just really through frustration of not being able to make the kind of music that I really wanted to make. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but I just started experimenting on my own. And then I heard somebody told me about the Benjamin Franklin glass harmonica instrument, and I just thought it was really, really beautiful. And I realised that I wasn't going to be able to get one of those because at that time there was only one company in the world that was making them commercially, and that was a company called Gerhard Finkenbeiner Incorporated in Philadelphia in the States. And I think at the time they were retailing at something like $10,000 or something. So yeah, I couldn't get one of those. So I started to go to charity shops and collect glasses. And you can't really see, but over there is a cabinet which is full of glasses, small glasses. So I just started really experimenting with those. And because I'd been in bands and played bass guitar, and usually through a lot of effects, I really just sort of carried on using those kind of techniques, but with glass. So I thought, how do I amplify them? And so I really just set about doing that. And I think I did my first gig with glass, I think it was 2009. And I didn't really think that I would carry on doing that, but I did. So yeah, and then I actually stopped playing. I did my last gig in 2018. It just got to the point where I was really frustrated by my live setup. It's ridiculous to try and cart around a load of glass and electronics. And it just got to the point where I was just thinking, I don't really want to play live anymore. And by that time I'd already started making sound installations. So that's been the focus basically since I think 2016. And as I said, I did my last live performance in 2018. But that doesn't mean that I'll never do it again. It's just at the moment I want to focus on sound installation. That's a sort of potted history.
Sure. So how you're now doing a PhD in Huddersfield? How did
Yes.
How did the education, further education, interject with the live situation? What made you return to university or go to university?
Well, I didn't go to university when I was younger. Basically, I when I was 18, I wanted to. I wouldn't have had the courage at that point to go and study music because I didn't think that I was good enough. And I mean, you know, that was when I was 18 was a long time ago. So there weren't that many music technology courses at the time. And I definitely didn't feel like that was something that I could do. So I left home and joined a band and moved into a squat in Hackney and did that instead, really. And I did actually study politics for a short time. I started an undergraduate degree when I was about 22. But at the time I was working full time and I just really couldn't get into that. So I left. And then I think, you know, when I started playing music on my own, I was really interested in the technology, but didn't really know how to use it and became frustrated by that. And in 2012, I had probably the worst year of my life. My mother died very suddenly. My grandmother died, my aunt died. And I think that kind of set me on a course of thinking, life's too short, really, just do the things you want to do. So that year I enrolled in a music technology BSc, which was amazing.
Where was this?
That was at London Metropolitan University, and it was music technology BSc sound for media. So it was perfect for me. It was a sound design degree, where I learned how to make film, learned different technology, started to use Maximus P, and really, yeah, that it was fantastic. It was probably one of the best things I've ever done.
And so did this work alongside the glass thing, or was this before the glass thing?
No, it was alongside. I mean, basically, I think one of the things, because I hadn't studied at that level before, I didn't really know what to expect. And I think for the first couple of years, I mean, there wasn't really a lot of room to sort of make the kind of work that I was interested in making, because a lot of the work that I was doing, it was the first time I'd done it. So learning how to make film, learning how to make sound for radio, sound for film and things like that. So it was, although it was creative, there wasn't a lot of room for my own kind of music in that, until the final year when I made a sound installation and I decided to introduce the glass to that. So I made an interactive sound installation for 6 large glasses like the ones behind me. But it gave me the tools to do the things that I wanted to do in my own creative practice. And it was really then that I decided that I took a year out, but I wanted to carry on doing that and carry on researching and really focus on my own creative practice, which is why I came to Huddersfield to do a master's, which turned into a PhD accidentally, which is where I am now.
So you were still gigging whilst you were at the university doing your undergraduate?
Yeah. I did quite a few gigs at that time. And, you know, although, as I said, like during the actual degree, there wasn't a lot of my own music in the kind of coursework that I was doing. What I was learning, I was carrying into my creative practice. So, you know, I started to use Maximus P in my live performances. For example, I built a live Max patch. I thought naively, because I was carrying around a lot of kind of big analog effects, and if you're carrying around that and a lot of large glassware, it's a lot of stuff to carry. And I thought, I've got to make this sustainable, I've got to make it smaller. So I stupidly thought that the way to do that would be to use a computer to do the processing, which is why I wanted to use Maximus P. Right. But that it didn't get smaller, it got bigger and more complicated.
How did it get bigger?
Well, I mean, with the installations, they're pretty big. I mean, I use 2 big sound cards. They're actually plugged in. I won't get them, but and you know, so I started to and using a lot of microphones, and it just became more complex basically. And also, you know, in using the software in the way that I was using it, I was able to use more glass, which meant more breakable things to carry around. So yeah.
So you were using microphones back then, because I know, having seen the film, that you're now using other forms of technology to drive the resonance of the glass. So back then you were using microphones, and I guess there were microphone stands and microphones on all the glasses going through all of the sound cards.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, actually over here I've got the kind of microphone. Let me just grab. So sorry, I'm really bad with my own equipment, so this is a bit of a mess. But I don't know if you can see this, but this is a PVDF tab. So this is a kind of microphone. It's a bit like a contact microphone. It's very sensitive, and I buy these from a woman in America called Leanne Morissette, who makes microphones under the name Cold Gold Microphones. So these I've been using for a long time, probably about 10 years. I do sometimes use overhead microphones, but yeah, I mean, I think the difference between my live music practice and the installation work is that with my live practice, I was playing the glasses by hand. But with my installations, I didn't want to do that and can't do that, because then it's a live performance rather than installation. So I needed to find a way to make the glasses play without me. And the way I did that is by basically using a small transducer, which you can see on the glasses. And that sends a sine wave at the resonant frequency of the glass, which makes it vibrate and sound. So that's, I mean, I think the first installation I did that with was Partita for Unattended Glass Harp 1. So I've been using that technique for a while now, and it still needs work, because, you know, things like that happen if you're not careful, if you drive the transducer too hard. And also, you know, over time they get stressed. So there's still a lot of work for me to do. And there are, sorry, I just put that down so I don't impale myself. There are other ways to make the glasses play independently. There is an amazing artist called Timothy Didymus who made an absolutely stunning sound installation called Cosmische Glass. And he's done that basically by rotating the glasses on turntables and playing them with like, he basically has these turn arms with bits of cork on that rub along the glasses as they rotate. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. If I had the technical capability to make something like that, I probably would. But what I'm using at the moment with the transducers works for me. So, yeah.
Actually, to do with what you've just been speaking, PA has asked, was it the transducer that broke that big glass?
Yeah, the max patch for this particular installation is a bit more lively than usual. And I wasn't really paying attention, and I think I meant to turn the transducer down, and I just drove it I think I drove it too hard, basically. The volume was up too high. And I had my back to it, and I heard it ring, and I was like, whoa. And as I turned around, it just went, poof. So luckily, that's only happened twice. I think the last time that happened was in 2018. And luckily, when they go, it's not actually that dramatic, which is good. You don't want glass flying everywhere, particularly if you're installing and exhibiting something in public. Yes. So it does just sort of go.
But so is it always volume, or could it be pitch?
It could be. Well, the thing is, to get the glass to vibrate, you have to find the right pitch. Yeah. So I mean, I tune them beforehand. I find out what their resonant frequency is. And then normally I can find out to a couple of hertz, basically what they are. And then what I normally do is basically sweep the sine wave around that kind of frequency until it really rings. And you can tell when you've hit that spot, because it really does. And sometimes you can actually see the glass moving, which is quite scary. So yeah, with that one, I think I just had it a little bit, I had the speaker up a bit too high, and it just didn't like it. So yeah.
So I noticed in some of the glasses there's water. Is that to change the resonant frequency?
Yeah, well, it changes the pitch basically. So yeah, I mean, these glasses, the ones that I particularly like, unfortunately, they're not made anymore, which is a shame, which presents a bit of a problem for me. I have tried lots of different types of glassware, but these particular ones I really like. But obviously they're not made for music. They're made for things like flowers, for wedding tables and stuff like that. So I can't choose what their pitch is. So I kind of have to work with what I've got and what I can find. And to a degree, I can tune them with water, basically. So, yeah.
So what was really interesting in the film of the piece was how light played such a role in the visual aspect of the installation.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're not going to be there, then there needs to be a kind of visual aspect to the work. How important do you think that is? And in terms of the blue LEDs that you used, how important was that as part of that performance of the installation?
I think when I first started doing it, I mean, one of the things that I noticed when I played live is that people were quite very interested in the glasses themselves. Every time I played a gig, somebody wanted to come up and play them, which was fine, as long as they didn't break them. So people were really fascinated by them as objects, which is lovely, and they are beautiful to look at. But with the installation, there's not a lot to see, unless, you know, sometimes when they get lively, the water moves, you get these really beautiful shapes in the water, and sometimes you can see the glass moving. But other than that, there's not a lot to see. And I've always been interested in sculpture particularly. But I hadn't really concentrated on that side of things at all because I was too busy making the technology work.
Sure.
So other people said to me, I mean, my supervisor, Monty Adkins, had suggested using lighting. And then actually earlier this year, I was having a chat with a friend of mine, Simon Smith, and he said, why don't you use uplights? And I was, you know, these are things that I hadn't really paid attention to because I hadn't had time. And I think, you know, like obviously, really, I think the only thing that kind of spurred me on to do that was that in the situation that we're in with lockdown, you know, I've made 2 works this year where I've had to think about them differently. I had to use a camera. And funny enough, when I started the MA PhD, I had intended to carry on making film because I started to do that at my undergraduate level. But I, you know, as anyone that's done any postgraduate work knows, you start off with too many ideas and you have to hone it down, and something had to go, and it was that. But because of the situation that we're in, I had actually suddenly I needed to film this work and see it in a different way. And so I did that earlier on this year with the piece Alucita II, which I did for Vicky Bennett, People Like Us, for her Hall Walls residency. And I had no choice but to make a film piece for it. And so I kind of went back to thinking about that. And, you know, so really it's more of a recent development. It's something that I've meant to do, but it didn't seem to be it wasn't the focus of my work, and it still isn't the focus of my work. But, you know, they are beautiful objects. And actually, once I did start to experiment with filming them, lighting them in different ways, it was really interesting, kind of working with the shadows. So it is something that I intend to carry on working with, but it's still fairly undeveloped.
Cool. So you said earlier that you started working with Max MSP, and Max has been a kind of a friend through the years.
A frenemy. So it's a
frenemy indeed.
Yeah.
In regard to the installations,
yeah.
How in the early iterations, how was Max being used to generate the work?
I think the first time I used it in an installation was the final piece of my undergraduate degree, and that was an interactive installation. So actually I had 6 glasses in a room, which basically people were invited to play by hand. And that was the sound from that was going into a microphone, going into a Max patch, and that was triggering film and separate soundtracks. Oh, right. So that was an interactive piece. And then around about the same time, I developed a live patch, which basically enabled me, sorry, I'll just turn my email off because I'm getting loads of emails for about, now I'm getting Telegram things. Hang on, let me just turn that off. So yeah, I'll mute that. Yeah, I'm going to, there we go, sorry about that. Yeah, so then I made a live patch. I was very lucky actually because I started using Max at undergraduate, but I really found it really, really hard, and I still do. And I had a friend called Tom Mudd who was doing some sound engineering at Cafe Otto where I worked, and Tom's very, very, very good at things like that. I think he's working at Edinburgh now, and he helped me develop a live patch. And that enabled me to do a lot of the processing that I wanted to do, but without the clunky, heavy boxes that I was using. Mm-hmm. So, but really, there's not much to it. It's reverb. I love reverb. I use far too much reverb. I was using a lot of pitch control because I could only take a certain amount of glasses with me. So if I had 3 glasses with me live, I would use pitch control with that and to basically change the pitch and process that to expand the kind of sonic palette that I had available to me. And those were really the things that I carried on using with Max all the way through. There's still far too much reverb. But with the Alucita I, again, I was having a conversation with my friend Simon, and I was saying that, you know, I really like the way that you can hear the harmonics in the glass when you're playing them. And when I'm playing them, obviously when I'm playing them by hand, I'm very close to them, so I can hear them very well. And I wanted to find a way that I could control that within a Max Patch, and so that's when I turned to James Bradbury, who is here somewhere. And James, again, I mean, I think, you know, I want to be able to do everything myself, but I think I had to make a decision, and that decision was, do I want to really learn how to use Max very, very well and become a coder, or do I want to make the work? And I think, you know, for me, I can use Max, I can make things myself, but I would spend at least 4 times the amount of time, if not more, that James would, bashing my head against a brick wall, trying to work out how to do something, crying, swearing, and then find myself in a situation where actually I've run out of time to make the piece. Sure. So in the end, you know, it's been interesting to kind of to work with somebody like James, who's much more talented in that area.
I wonder if it's a good moment to bring James in. Maybe.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Charlotte can do that. I don't know how we.
Hello.
Talk.
Oh, there he is. Hello, James.
Hi, James.
Hi.
So maybe James, you could give us a kind of overview of what you did in the Max patch for this piece.
Yeah. So I think, Andy, you approached me and said, I want to make a weezy organ.
Yeah.
Out of glass, and I want to do it this way, and I'm interested in this thing.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of initially ran with it and made like a bunch of things that all did the same kind of thing, but a different approach. So there was like something that generated harmonics with a fixed spacing. There was something that could generate. I actually can't remember now. It was quite a while ago. Then there was another thing that
you made
analyzed.
A resonator.
I made a what? Sorry.
Resonator, which I will.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. There was something that generated using delays, like a kind of resonator type sound. So you like activated it with some noise or another signal, and then there was a kind of spectral freeze that I made.
Which again, I'm going to go back to and use for sure.
Yeah, and I gave these to Andie's as little modules to plug in where she wanted to in existing patches. And they had a little interface so that she could just like use it straight away, no kind of faff. Because you also emphasize like you want to just do the creative stuff. You don't want to be like, oh, I need to like make a coal and then blah blah blah. And so it was just like a thing that she dropped in. And then Andie said, oh, I really like this one, which was the one I was like, please don't say you like that one. It's like the most problematic. I don't really like it. But I think that's like kind of the beauty of it, is that Andie took it and then made something with it that I wouldn't have. It was truly collaborative in that sense. And yeah, I guess it was basically from that point onwards, it was a process of refinement. Said, I can't do this. I need to be able to control this part. And I said, okay. And then a couple of hours later, she'd have a new patch to drop in. And then she'd be like, okay, I can do this. Now I need to like go to a higher level concept and control this aspect of the music, and be like, okay. And it ended up actually working quite organically in that sense. Like we never really jumped around different levels of the music too much. It was like, here's the sound. Now here's the timing of the harmonics. Now here's the timing of the timings of the groups of harmonics. Yeah. Now let's make a thing that schedules the glasses. And it became this kind of neat little suite of objects that all talk to each other through magical patch cables and coals. And they for me it was quite a nice project because I got to kind of work the Max muscle from an objective point of view as well. Because when I do stuff for myself, I just kind of go, yeah, that's good enough. But for Andie, I have to think about every scenario where it could break. or for every scenario that she might want to do in the moment or something.
Yeah.
Basically reducing the friction between what's in her head and what she wants to do. So that's, yeah.
Which required quite a lot of patience, to be honest, because I think, you know, I'm not very good at explaining things. So I'd be like, I think probably a lot of what I was saying was kind of sort of weird esoteric garbage, but James somehow managed to interpret my requests with a lot of patience. So
There was a little bit of sitting on Zoom telling you which object to drag around. Which thing to plug where.
Yeah.
It's good fun.
So were there iterations of these little modules that, like you said, you were talking about them being organic? Did they kind of grow from a small thing and then kind of bloom over time?
Yeah, I think all of the things that I sent her initially were quite bare, very, very simple. My interpretation of like how someone would want to do a specific thing with harmonics. So I think I remember it was just like, here's a fundamental and give me the harmonic series. And then Andie was like, oh, it's really nice when you have the beating patterns. And I was like, oh, well, if we kind of crush the harmonic series a little bit, that could be nice. So then there's now like a slider to change the spacing. And then it became more complex because it was like, I think particularly as we got to higher level, talking about higher level things about timing and indeterminacy with like controlling the glasses, it was a bit like, we need to be able to plug everything into everything, and to specify like the more nuanced details of how these things operate, rather than just like an effect plugin that you turn on and something happens. It was more about control, and having a sense of delegating timing away to the computer and letting it kind of have some influence over that.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it's about using Max to compose in some respects.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I mean, I think with every piece, every installation that I've made, I've started off with an idea of how I wanted it to sound, but then through a process of sort of trial and error, I have actually got there. But you know, a lot of the time, it is about kind of working with the idea and the technology, and then sometimes the composition comes right at the end, and that's, I think, the gap between that and that is becoming smaller the more I do it, basically, and the more I understand the processes behind it. But with this one particularly, I knew how I wanted it to sound, and it does sound exactly how I wanted it to sound, which is, you know, that's amazing. But you never quite know, and sometimes, you know, things come up and you're like, well, I actually hadn't thought about that, and that's pretty amazing. So it is, I think, basically because I come from a background of improvisation, there's still quite a lot of improvisation in my work in that respect as well. And experimentation, I mean, a lot of people kind of balk about the term experimental music, but I think I do make experimental music because my work is about experimenting and trying out different things, and you know, and I think that's the thing with the glass. As I said, when I first started using it, I thought I would probably just do a couple of gigs, maybe some recording, but I haven't even scratched the surface. There's so many things that I want to do. 13 years later, I'm still finding new ways to work with it and new things to do, and I find that really exciting. So
in this piece, you're able to make different iterations of the sound world with the patch and let the computer deal with that situation.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, the way that it sounds is largely, in some respects, is largely governed by those things over there, because, you know, they are, although I can change the pitch to a certain degree with tuning, they are what they are. They're not gonna, you know, so that obviously makes a big difference. But I think with this particular, I think with all of my installations, I could go back to them and make new work out of those ideas as well. And actually with this piece, I want to do that. I think, you know, there's a lot of experimenting that I can do with it, and I want to do some recording over the next couple of months and make a release out of it, which hopefully is coming out. Somebody's already agreed, or in principle, to put it out. So, yeah.
Excellent. So just to move on from the work in your attic, how do you think it will alter? How do you think it will change when it goes into a bigger space in the way that it should have been in Dai Hall in Huddersfield, a big retail space with white walls. It was going to sit in there and make beautiful noises. How do you think that alters the piece, or how do you imagine that it would alter the piece?
I mean, it will sound different because what you hear at the moment in the video is a straight to computer recording. There's no room recording in that, partly because I filmed and recorded it on bonfire night. So yeah, it was very noisy around here. But there, you know, it was more difficult to do a room recording here for other reasons as well. Also, I have neighbours. But you will have heard, Stephen, because I sent you the camera recording. You will have heard what you could hear in the room, which is quite different, but adds another layer to it, because you can hear, because some of the glasses are very, very close together in frequency, you hear a lot more beating in the room. It was actually it reminded me in some respects. So years ago, I went to the Dream House, Lamont Young's Dream House in New York, and I hated it. It's really oppressive. I wasn't expecting that. I thought it would be really kind of dreamy and kind of nice droney music, but it wasn't. And there's a lot of beating, and it really hurt my ears. And actually, that in the room, what I could hear in the room, kind of in some respects reminded me of that. But it was the beating. Well, it wasn't quite as oppressive. But so there will be another. You won't hear that very loudly because I would bring the amplified volume up, but you would hear it. And the other thing is that the glasses act differently in different spaces. Also depends on what I put them on. I mean, here they're on a table. You can probably see, and you will see in the video, that there's some acoustic foam underneath them, and that's there to isolate them. Because the microphones are very sensitive and they pick up everything. So actually, you can sometimes pick up people walking around the floor and things like that. And I had asked Ryoko to have these plinths made for me, which she did at expense, and then we can use them. But that will make a difference as well. So everything that they go on will make a difference in terms of the sound. And I think, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing it in the space. I've exhibited other installations in the atrium at Huddersfield University, and that space worked really well. Which I was surprised.
That's huge, isn't it?
It is, and that kind of scared me, because I've played live in churches, and it's been a nightmare because of the kind of way that the spaces work and the reverb. I think one of the last gigs I did was at the Union Chapel in London, which is a very big chapel with a very high ceiling. It was a nightmare. So playing live with them is quite difficult in big reverberant spaces, but actually the installations seem to work in those kind of spaces. But the space definitely makes a difference. And what you would hear when it's hopefully installed in Dai Hall will be a bit different to what you experience in the film.
Can you just talk a little bit about the Alucita, the title? How is this in the referring back to the glasses? What is the story there?
I think it came again from the idea that I wanted to kind of pick out the harmonics. And at the time, I think I saw a moth, and it had lots of kind of feathers, and I thought, what is that? And I looked it up, and it's called an Alucita moth. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But they have lots of yeah. They have lots of little feathered wings. They're not like normal moths. They don't have kind of, you know, they're kind of very long, thin tendrils, and that reminded me of the harmonics, the way that I wanted that to fan out. And that's why, so that just often that happens with titles, just things will come to me and I'll like the sound of the word. And I think that kind of came through as well with both of the iterations of Alucita 1 and 2. That's why I kind of chose to make it quite dark, because obviously a moth is a nocturnal creature. So there was something in that, I think.
Cool. So I'm interested to know where you think you might be going from here. I know this is a very, very new piece, and it's been the last few days has been finishing it up. So
Yeah.
you may not even be thinking about a future, but I guess that
Right.
something in the work has kind of sparked some ideas, some future ideas, and I'd be really interested to know what those might be.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think I really want to kind of carry on working with this piece. Definitely want to do some recordings. I think that's one thing that I'm really conscious of. I haven't actually had much recorded material out for a long time. I've made one album, and that was released 10 years ago. So it's probably about time that I did something like that. I have done some smaller recording, smaller releases. I released a 40-minute piece earlier this year for John Abbey's, who runs Erstwhile Recordings. He did an online festival called Amplify Quarantine 2020. So there's a 40-minute piece on that, which is actually taken from recordings from Partita for Glass Harp 2, I think. So I do, when I make the installations also, I have in mind that I'm going to sort of take recordings of them and turn them into something else as well. So I think that's what I'm going to spend the next wee while working on. And then next year I'm doing probably one of my favourite ever artworks ever is a sound installation called The Long Player by Jem Finer. And I love the installation itself. Is at in a lighthouse in Docklands in London, and every year they do an outreach day where they do a kind of a set of live performances, and that's normally in London. But this summer, last summer gone, that was supposed to be in Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and I was asked to do something for that, but that's now been postponed to next summer at Yorkshire Sculpture Park. So that's in mind. I've also got a possible collaboration with a pianist who's been in touch, and I need to get back to her. So we might do something together. So yeah, there's things, and also I've got to do my PhD. Yeah, but I managed to get all of these pieces managed to get into my portfolio. So there's
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Andie, thank you very much indeed for that. What I'd really like to do now is perhaps open it up to the floor. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand, and the host, Charlotte, will get you to turn your camera on. If you don't want to put your camera on, then just ask the question in the chat. I've got the chat in front of me here, and I can ask that question. So if you
I'd like to see people's faces if they don't mind, but it's up to them.
Andie would like to see faces if it's possible. So that would be great. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll get to you. Charlotte.
We don't have any raised hands yet.
Okay.
There is a question in the chat from Ryoko earlier, just about how expensive are those big wine glasses?
They are quite expensive. I mean, now they're not made anymore. They were made by a company called LSA from Sweden, and I did write to them a number of times and explain what I was doing with their glasses and see if they wanted to work with me, and they just ignored me. So but when I could buy them, they were about 25 to 30 pounds each. Those ones, I've got bigger ones up there. They were about 50 pounds. And I have got a large collection now of very large brandy glasses, which are about 25, 30 pounds each. But it is a problem, actually. That's something that I need to work on. Last year, I was in talks with a glassmaker in France, and I was hopefully going to do some work with them. But unfortunately, I was ill, and so couldn't pursue that. And then I think by the time I got back to them, it was the wrong time for them. So, but I do, it's something I have to think about, because if I break these, there now aren't any more left. I think I bought every single one that was left in the country. So yeah, and I do work with other types of glass, but those particular ones I like. They do what I need them to do.
What do the brandy glasses sound like?
They're just not quite so resonant. They're a little bit more flat. Yeah, they're okay, but yeah, they're not as nice as these. So yeah, you should send the French maker your video. Yeah, maybe that would be good. I should send it to them, actually. I should get in touch with them again. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Vicky can't. Vicky's got her video disabled. I think Charlotte.
Oh yeah, sorry, that was me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You should be able to come on video now.
Oh, hello, Vicky.
Hi.
Oh, now you're muted. I think Charlotte has to unmute you, or you have to unmute yourself.
You all should be able to unmute yourselves.
Okay.
So can you unmute yourself, Vicky?
Yeah, I think I have. Can you hear me?
There you go. Wonderful.
Yeah, hey, Vicky.
That was great. It was so lovely to hear about your work. I had
you.
a question about this is maybe a bit of you said esoteric before, but maybe this is one of those questions, just about your relationship to the material itself and your relationship to glass. And have you ever kind of, I don't know, kind of learned how to sort of work with glass as a sort of bare material, or learned like the processes or how to make that? Is that something that interests you? Or
it is really of interest, and that's one of the things that was really exciting about the people in France, because they're in a little island, and they have their own hot shop, and that was something I was really interested in. And at some point I also was wanting to get in touch with the National Glass Centre up in Newcastle, which I might still do. I would be really interested in making it myself, or at least having a dabble. But it's really hard. Actually, when I was speaking to the company in France who are called Fluid, who make really beautiful glassware, they explained to me how difficult it is to make glasses that are a specific tone, because of the process, basically. So when you're making the glass, it has to be very, very hot, but to get it to be a certain pitch, you have to grind it down, so you have to cool it down very quickly, and so you've got a really kind of thin window of time to make it into a certain tone. And they started doing that. They made a really beautiful sound installation with bells, with a percussionist. And they did make me some prototypes, which I've got over there, but they're so delicate, I'm too scared to do what I do with them with transducers, because I know they'll break. I can play them by hand. So yeah, but I'm really interested, really interested in working with it myself, but also with working with a glass maker to do stuff. That's definitely something I think I need to look for funding for, that, because it's potentially very expensive.
So Joe Kennedy asked, do all the glasses have about the same resonance?
Not always. Some of them are really different. Like a lot of the ones over there, they're all around about sort of between 350 and 450 hertz. But sometimes they're a lot higher than that. So they're normally in sort of fairly high frequency ranges, but yeah, it depends.
Yeah, George says the thin window that you spoke about in the manufacture of glass was a beautiful comparison between your work and the glass.
That's nice.
I agree. That's a lovely term.
Yeah.
There's a question here that are there metaphors for you of glass? This is from Palomi. Are there metaphors for you of glass and Ouija, the spirit boards, the resonant frequencies here being the ghost that breaks through? Rudiv, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Also, the question about light, we kind of spoke about the light and the refraction earlier, but anyway, so do you think there's a metaphor between the spirit and the glass?
Not for me personally, but it definitely is something that has come up in my research, because when Benjamin Franklin invented the glass harmonica, the instrument itself was then used by Dr. Franz Mesmer in his seances. So basically, Mesmer is the word mesmerism comes from Franz Mesmer. So Mesmer basically he was employing techniques of early hypnosis, and the seances were usually for hysterical ladies. And so he would have a glass harmonica player behind a curtain, and he would basically mesmerize the hysterical women. So there's a lot of really interesting kind of that kind of interest in that kind of things, that side of things. So, and people often, I've found, when they're talking about glass music, they often use the word mesmerizing without knowing the connection, which is really interesting. And also, I mean, there's lots of stories, historical stories about glass making people go mad, the sound of glass making people go mad, because some people say that it's because when they were making these instruments they had lead in the glass and people were licking their hands and going mad with lead poisoning. I think from what I've read a lot, I think that's been pretty much debunked, but there, you know, I think a lot of the associations with this kind of madness do probably come from the work of Franz Mesmer. So there is a thing, I find that fascinating, and I find the history of glass music really fascinating, and I have touched on that in my research. And in terms of the light and refraction, it's not something that I use with the sound. It's not something, I mean, as I was saying earlier, really with the kind of visual side of things, that's come later, because I've spent so much time working on the technology and making the sound, that it's basically taken me a lot longer to kind of take care of the visual side of things, and I still got a lot of work to do. I mean, you know, the transducers and the bits of really cheap speaker wire are not very pretty, which again is another reason to use lighting and make it look a bit nicer. But yeah, there's still some work to do there. I hope that answered the question. Any other questions?
Have we got any other questions, perhaps, from anyone?
Hi, Andy.
Oh, hello, Peter.
Yeah, what happens if you try wine instead of glass, instead of water in a glass? Like, how does it affect the sound?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, you'd have to use something quite thick, I think, for it to be. Maybe oil might change the sound. That would probably dampen it. But yeah, I haven't, as you know, Peter, because Peter and I know each other. I have not ever drunk. Actually, that's not true. I haven't drunk alcohol out of them until recently, when I did have a very large gin and tonic in one of them for a video I made for some friends' festival. But yeah, something like wine wouldn't make a big difference to the sound, because it's not thick enough really for it to dampen the glass. But something like oil probably would dampen the glass quite a lot, I would think.
So that's the only effect it would have, is actually.
I think so. It's not, to be honest, it's not something I've really tried, because I've not really been interested in trying.
Ketchup. Yeah.
Pardon? Ketchup. Yeah, well, I mean, it would be interesting. It could be quite messy. I mean, the thing is, if one of them breaks and it's got water in it, it's not great. But I mean, if one of them explodes with ketchup in it, that could be interesting and quite a mess. So yeah.
So yeah, people are coming up with different materials that we might be able to put in the glass. Mercury and lead.
That could be dangerous.
It would be very, very dangerous and
yeah.
Very foolish, I think.
I mean, to be honest, I think most people that know me know I'm clumsy. So I think I'm trying to sort of make it less dangerous, not more.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So are there any plans? It's only intimated here, but PA is asking about the bass again. Is there any plans to go back there and incorporate that in the work, perhaps?
No, in my earlier recorded work, I did a lot. I mean, I didn't really start making music just with glass until relatively recently. So most of my earlier recordings, there's quite a lot of double bass, bowed bass, and other instruments in that. Some accordion, which is quite amusing because I don't play accordion, but I have got 3. And things like shruti boxes, more quite drony instruments. But I don't think so. I'd miss the bass, but I think for me, I'd like the opportunity maybe to sort of play with other people occasionally. I do actually play with Sharon Gal, who is a bass player as well. And actually, when we usually play together, she sings, and I play glass. But we have talked about possibly doing a 2 bass gig at some point. So we may. I'm not saying never, but I don't really see playing bass with. I think because I want to concentrate on my installations rather than playing live anyway as well. I don't really have an interest in kind of incorporating the bass with that.
I know that the earlier on you mentioned the work that's in the lighthouse in the Docklands.
Yeah,
it was featured on a TV show, I think, on a travelling show. We spoke about it, didn't we? Is that the same thing?
I don't remember.
Okay,
But
so there's a room that has this droning thing going on, and it's been going on for years.
that's right. It's a 1,000-year installation.
1,000 years, that's
I think
right.
it's been going on for 11 years now.
Yeah, and I know that they occasionally get people to come along and make music with the music, and I wonder whether or not that's something that I mean, you mentioned Sharon there,
Yeah.
the vocalist. Is that something that you do, that you allow the installation to continue and then have musicians come and respond in
my installations, you mean?
Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely not something I'd rule out. I mean, I have thought, I did think about it probably a while ago, and I thought about doing a live gig with it in that way, but it's not something I've thought about a lot recently because I've been focused on this. But actually, there is an ensemble who took one of the pieces from one of my early installations and scored it, and they played it live, and it was really beautiful actually. And I can't remember how to pronounce the name, so I'm not going to embarrass myself, which is really bad. Metapraxis Ensemble.
Okay.
Metapraxis Ensemble, yeah. And that was, I think that was last year or the year before.
Is it online?
I think so. I think there is a video. They sent me a video. They did it at Cafe Otto. And it was the piece for my actually the first ever sound installation that I made, which I then ended up making a sort of video fixed media version of. It was that they took. Yeah. So yeah, maybe at some point in the future.
So James Bradbury is saying glass organ with organ.
Well, funny enough, actually, Pam and I we have sort of talked about that, because Pam, who is a very wonderful church organist.
Okay. Cool.
So that I think I would be really interested in, and maybe at some point when we're able to do things like travel to other countries. Although, having said that, of course, Brexit has now possibly made that even more hard. But at some point, I'd like to go to Berlin and try that out with Pam, definitely.
There's a fantastic organ in Harlem, I think it is. Is it Harlem? There's a massive organ there, and they do free recitals on a Tuesday at 4 o'clock. So if you ever find yourself in Harlem, then definitely go. It's amazing. Ryoko's saying perhaps an glass organ concert at Dai Hall. That sounds like a fantastic idea. We'll get Pam over and we can do something in Dai Hall. That would be really amazing.
The Orgel Park would be a great shot for that, Amsterdam. Isn't that Laurens? Did you not do? I'm looking at Laurens. I think Laurens didn't you make a piece for organ somewhere in Amsterdam? Or was it somewhere else?
We're not got anything from
No. It's trying to type something, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
And Ben
Okay.
also.
Here we go. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions?
Have we got any other questions? Because we might well wrap this up if there are none.
Yeah.
The answer is yes, Lawrence 2020. PA. Cool.
I have a question.
Oh. Hello. Hello
Thank
there.
you, Andie. It's brilliant to do this more informal, formal, to really listen as well about your work. What are you going to do after your PhD? What are your plans?
Well, I mean, I've still got a year left, and then I'll probably take the write-up year, so I don't have to think about it for a while. I think, I mean, to be honest with you, so I spend half my time making my own creative work, and I spend half my time facilitating other people's creativity. So I spent 10 years working for Cafe Otto as the finance person. And then when I moved up here, I now work for an electronic music booking agent called Annex, who I love working for. So I probably will, I think my plan is that I'd like to get to a point where I can sort of do my facilitating other people's creativity work for 2 days a week, and then spend 3 days a week making my own work, and just carry on doing that, really. I don't really have much of an ambition beyond that, really, if I'm honest. If I can just find ways to sustain what I'm doing and carry on learning and carry on making work. And if people want to pay me to do that, that's brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great?
Yes.
Being paid to carry
Ambition
on.
number one, finish the write-up. Yes, PA,
Yeah.
that's definitely on the cards. Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap this up now. So
Okay.
can I first of all thank everyone for coming? It's been fantastic, wonderful turnout. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to James for talking about the tech side of things. That was great, really interesting.
Yeah,
Andie.
thank you everybody. And I'd just like to obviously thank you at AMA, everyone for the opportunity. It's been really, really nice to work on, and it was great to sort of, I'm really, really shit if I haven't got a deadline. So I need deadlines. So yeah, it was good to have a deadline.
No.
Unfortunately, we missed the deadline of the lockdown, but never mind.
But yeah, this will happen at Dai Hall, and
Yeah.
And it'll be great when it does, and I hope everyone will be able to come by and take a look at it. So thank you all for coming. Andie, thank you very, very much for being so honest and open and sharing everything with us all this evening. It's been loads of fun. It's always nice to chat with you. So thank you very much.
You too.
And Charlotte, thank you very much for hosting it and doing all the business. That's great. And Ryoko, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.